Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Natasha Shotunde. I'm a barrister at Garden Court Chambers, and I'm also the co-founder and chair of the Black Barristers Network. For those of you that do not know about BBN, we were set up in 2019 to promote the growth of Black barristers through support, visibility, and community outreach. Further information about us can be found on our website, the link for which I shall put in the chat later. In March 2020, an unprecedented 6 Black female barristers took silk. I remember the day that this year's QC appointments list was announced. It was the 16th of January 2020. At BBN, we have a committee WhatsApp group, and throughout the day, we were slowly hearing of more and more Black female barristers on the list. We were elated. I remember feeling overwhelmed with joy and pride. Pride for people I didn't even know. Mavis, our vice chair, and I were both feeling very emotional. In preparation for tonight's event, I questioned why I felt so emotional that day. It was because their achievement made feeling like becoming a QC for me was something that was possible as a Black woman who has to battle both racism and sexism. That is not to say that there hasn't been Black female QCs before, and I thank all of those who have paved the way. However, the sheer number made it feel like it was something that was achievable. You may wonder why I might have felt that this was something that may be unachievable. Many of you will be aware that the BSB statistics show that in December 2019, only 1.1% of QCs were Black. Prior to tonight's event, I obtained a further breakdown from the BSB. They've told me that as of the 1st of December 2019, there were a total of 1,834 practicing QCs at the bar. Out of that, only 3 of them were Black female QCs. And there were only 18 Black male QCs. As such, as a Black woman, becoming a QC almost seemed like an impossible dream. However, the success of our panelists tonight made this dream feel real, tangible, and possible. It's clear from the statistics that saying that this was an unprecedented and historic moment is no exaggeration. And we hope that this will mark the beginning of positive change in the advancement of Black barristers within our profession. Now it falls on me to introduce our panel for tonight. And tonight we have Krista Lee, who is a QC at Keating Chambers. She obtained a BA in law and the BCL at Oxford University. She was called to the bar in 1996. She's a commercial silk, specializing in construction, engineering, and energy disputes. Her practice encompasses a huge range of construction projects in the UK and overseas, including the UK's largest offshore wind farm, the Ministry of Defence's nuclear submarine base in Scotland, telecoms in Nigeria, hospitals in Ghana, and the tallest buildings in Dubai. Melanie Simpson, who is a QC at 25 Bedford Row. She attended a state grammar school before studying law at University College London. She was called to the bar in 1998 and is a specialist in the field of criminal law. She's instructed to act in high-profile cases which often attract widespread media interest. Melanie recognizes the importance of the phrase, each one, teach one. Melanie's pro bono work has seen her sit on local youth justice boards, conduct human rights work in the Caribbean, and throughout her career, she has mentored aspiring barristers. Next, we have Katharine Newton QC, who is Deputy Head of Chambers at Old Square Chambers. She was called to the bar in 1999. She studied law at Manchester and undertook a master's in employment law at King's College London. Her practice area is employment law. Prior to taking silk, Katharine was Chambers and Partners Employment Junior of the Year in 2018, and the only junior barrister to appear in the Lawyer Hot 100 in the same year. She's regularly instructed in high-profile, high-value, and complex employment and discrimination claims, including some of the most high-profile litigations in the employment bar. Next, we have Allison Munroe QC, who is at Garden Court Chambers. She studied history and political science at Cambridge and undertook a master's in political science at LSE. She was called to the bar in 1992 and has a mixed practice encompassing inquiries, inquests, family, education law, crime, and mental health. Her career has focused upon acting for vulnerable clients with a particular emphasis on civil liberties. Allison represented a large number of families in the Hillsborough inquest and presently represents the number of bereaved families, registrants, and survivors at the Grenfell Tower public inquiry. We have Barbara Mills QC, who practices family law from 4 paper buildings. She studied law at Hull University and was called to the bar in 1990. She qualified as a mediator in 2005, was appointed a recorder in 2012, and qualified as an arbitrator in 2016. She's the winner of the Family Law Junior Barrister of the Year in 2009, and she is the co-chair of the Race Working Group at the Bar Council. And last but not least, we have Ijeoma Omambala, who is a QC at Old Square Chambers. She studied law at Cambridge, followed by a master's in criminology at Cambridge. She was called to the bar in 1989. She practices employment law, public procurement, and healthcare. She's also a mediator, conducting a number of multi-day mediations, primarily in finance, health, and local government sectors. She is an accredited advocacy trainer at Gray's Inn and was elected a bencher at the same inn in January 2014. She's also a visiting lecturer in public procurement law at the University of Nottingham. Our panelists will be providing us with information about their journey from First Six to Silk and advice on how to survive and thrive at the bar. This event tonight will be chaired by Mavis Amonoo-Acquah, who's a family law barrister at Harcourt Chambers and is also a co-founder and vice chair of the Black Barristers Network. Just some quick housekeeping. The chat function will be open throughout the event for comments. However, if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function button at the bottom of the screen. Now I shall pass over to Mavis.
Thank you, Natasha, for that introduction. Now, as we know, the journey to Silk begins with undertaking a first six of pupillage. Now, I'm going to start this evening with Ijeoma, because as you were called to the bar in 1989, you were the first of our esteemed panel to be called. Now, I would imagine that applying for pupillage in 1989, it would be very different to applying for pupillage now. But looking back, what was the first obstacle you faced as an aspiring Black barrister seeking to begin your career at the bar, and in what way was that formative for you?
I think the first obstacle that I and I'm sure many others faced when I was seeking pupillage was just the lack of information and the availability of information about how to go about the process and what chambers to apply to. I applied for a large number of pupillages across a range of sets, doing a range of work, and I hedged my bet in the sense that I was looking at general common law sets as well as specialist sets, because I didn't have a very clear idea about what particular work I wanted to do, and I wanted to keep my options open. One of the most memorable things about the process for me, putting to one side the very positive things, which were to do with the information and advice and support that I got from unexpected quarters, people I didn't know very well, but who were willing to sit down with me and help me think about what I wanted to do and where it would be useful to apply. But I was invited to interviews at a number of sets, and one set in particular, which I won't name, but which was very eminent in its field and remains so, invited me for interview. And I turned up in my best suit, full of hope and ambition, preparing for what I expected to be another grueling pupillage interview, looking to find out who I was and what I was interested in doing and why I was applying to that set. And I was really taken aback because when I began the interview, or when I walked into the interview room, it became clear very early on that actually the set did not want to interview me. I was asked to sit down, and after some preliminary chit-chat, I was told that the set thought there were other places that it would be more appropriate for me to apply to, other sets where I would feel more comfortable, and had I thought about applying to them. And they, I think, intending to be helpful, suggested a number of alternative places that I ought to consider applying for pupillage. I have to say I was completely dumbfounded by the approach that was taken. It was couched in the usual British politenesses, and so my righteous anger had nowhere to go on that particular occasion. And I left probably 10 or 12 minutes into the interview, none the wiser as to why they had asked me to attend in the first place, and bemused at the processes that this particular chambers had put in place for its pupillage arrangements. I should say that other sets had a more professional approach to pupillage, interviewed those people that they were genuinely interested in considering for pupillage, and I was lucky enough to be awarded pupillage in a number of sets that taught me a lot and helped me to establish myself in practice.
Thank you, Ijeoma, for sharing that story with us. I think we can all safely say it was their loss in shepherding you elsewhere, because look at how much you have thrived now. Well, once we have pupillage and we've completed it and we have tenancy, the real work then begins as junior barristers to build our practices. So I want to look at how our panel have successfully done so during their careers. Now, something that we are often told as Black people is that we have to work harder, or indeed twice as hard, as our white counterparts in order to achieve the same successes as them. Now, Krista, I'm going to come to you for this next question. Looking back at your junior practice, did you ever feel that pressure to do more than your white colleagues in order to advance your practice? And what steps did you take to alleviate this undue burden? Krista.
So I'm not sure I worked twice as hard, and the reality is at the bar, it's a feature of being at the bar that people work hard and they work very long hours. But I think since university, I've always been very focused on becoming a barrister and later specialising in construction. And what I did to achieve those goals was to make sure I was academically good enough, that I had all the skills on my CV. So just to take a step back to pupillage, when I first applied for pupillage, I got a few rejections, which I was slightly shocked by, to be honest. So I went back to university to do the BCL, and I got pupillage as a result of that. But like Ijeoma, I wasn't really focused on which area of law I wanted to practice in. So I went to the general civil commercial set. And the way it worked there was that for the first few years, everybody, to get their advocacy experience, had to do small claims county court work up and down the country, and you spend a lot of time on your train. But what I learned from pupillage in my first pupil master was that I wanted to do construction. It's a sort of area of civil commercial law, which is about contractual disputes arising out of building projects, and also professional negligence claims against engineers or architects. So I had to decide how I was going to position myself to give the clerk something to sell to clients to get me into construction work, and also so that people would see I was serious about doing construction. So what I did was I did an engineering degree while I was on these trains up and down the country to county courts. And that worked because it meant I then had the language and the facility and the experience to talk to clients, architects and engineers. And so slowly I began to, after the first few years of small claims, then specialise in construction to the point where I was then able to move to Keating Chambers, which just specialises in construction work. But what I'd say is that along the way, at every stage, pupillage, tenancy and then specialisation, there are always different criteria. And you have to work out where you are going to excel, where you can easily tick the boxes. And for me, it was, intellectual ability. It was an easy thing for me to do, to study for another degree. Like Ijeoma as well, I wanted to do arbitration, so I went to do all the arbitration courses. So yes, I've worked hard and focused on doing what I want to do. But the bar, make no mistake, it's a hard-working profession for everyone.
Thank you, Krista. I will just say, I think it's absolutely incredible that you completed a whole degree whilst you were practicing full-time at the bar. I think that is truly a testament to your incredible work ethic and the work ethic exemplified by all of you ladies. I think it's also interesting to hear your perspective because there aren't many women at the construction bar, and certainly even fewer Black women in that particular practice area. Now, speaking of practice areas, as junior barristers, we can often or sometimes feel as though we're being pushed towards a certain practice area or boxed in towards that area because of our race or our gender or indeed both. Now, Melanie, you are at the criminal bar. Did you ever encounter this obstacle in your practice? And what advice would you have for junior barristers who feel as though they're being pushed in towards a practice area that they don't necessarily want to be going into? Melanie.
Well, I always wanted to do criminal law, and criminal defence was my passion. But you do get to a stage, certainly if you're a woman, and it happened to me at about maybe 12 years cool. I started to do a lot of rape cases, and you often find that women get pigeonholed into doing sex cases, and that was happening to me. I was doing too much sex, and it's very stressful. I mean, criminal law is stressful anyway, but sex cases are particularly stressful. And what you'll often find, if you go to I do a lot of multi-handed cases, and you go to a Crown Court and there's a multi-handed sex case, and you will see lots and lots of female barristers. You go to a multi-handed case that involves firearms or conspiracy to supply drugs, and it will be all men. And that's something that you do face actually as a woman, not only as a Black woman, but as a woman. And when it happened to me, I didn't want to be pigeonholed. And I would say to anyone who's listening, find an area of law that you love, that you enjoy, because if you enjoy it, the working hard, as we all have to do, will be easier. And when I found that I was getting pigeonholed into sex as a woman, you know, I spoke to my clerks and said, this is not this is not where I want to go. I don't mind doing the odd sex case, but I'm not going to be having to practice a diet of sex. And, you know, what happens is that you're told, well, you know, you might take a bit of a hit in your practice, but my advice would be to do it. Take control of your own practice. You will, when you're starting out, you will have solicitors that you build relationships up with. They're junior solicitors, you're a junior barrister, nurture those relationships, because as you progress in your career, they will also progress. And the work that they will send you will be high level work. And once you've built up your own connections and you've got your work, I mean, be good. Once you're good, you will get work. You will get recommendations from inside prisoners, you will get recommendations. And my advice would be to, you know, obviously you've got to rely on your clerks and rely on your chambers, but also take control of your own practice. Because if you're good, you've got your own work, you've got your own solicitors, you then have some power. So in answer to your question, my advice would be to don't pigeonhole yourself. Don't start doing an area of work that you don't enjoy, you don't want to do. Take control. And speak to your clerks, speak up. If you're not happy with it, don't put up with it. I mean, very often as barristers, we're pulled in so many different ways. We've got to keep solicitors happy, we've got to keep judges happy, we've got to keep our clerks happy. But what you also have to remember is that so far as your chambers and your clerks are concerned, they don't employ you, you employ them. So you take the control. And if you've got your own work, you've got some power. You've got some leverage. So I'm not saying that you have to paddle your own canoe all the way down the stream. Of course, we all need help. But, you know, you do need to take control and to say what it is that you want to be doing.
Thank you, Melanie. I think that is such important advice, and the importance of taking control of your practice. I think as juniors, that's something that we really need to bear in mind and be bold enough to step out and do. And on the back of the advice that you've started giving us, Melanie, I'm going to come to you, Katharine, and ask you this. What do you think we should be doing as Black practitioners to advance our practices, similar to what Melanie has started telling us, but more in terms of in situations where we may feel as though our white colleagues in chambers are being promoted more than we are by chambers, or are getting the best opportunities or the best work, and we aren't? What advice would you give Black practitioners to advance our practices in that respect?
Yes, well, I think first of all, if anybody feels that they're not being promoted as much as their white colleagues, that's incredibly serious and is something that needs to be addressed. And I fully recognise that perhaps that's easier said than done. But in the first instance, I would suggest that anybody in that situation should contact the Equality and Diversity Helpline of the Bar Council, because it's staffed with members of the Bar Council Equality Committees who are very used to discussing these sorts of issues with people who are having problems in chambers for all sorts of reasons, be it race or gender. And they will talk through with them on a confidential basis if necessary, and talk about how best to maybe address those issues in chambers. And I have to say I'm incredibly fortunate in that I don't think I've ever felt in my chambers that my race has been an issue with my clerks at all. But for those who aren't in that lucky situation, then I would direct them to the Equality and Diversity Helpline. But then I'd like to echo really what Melanie has said, which is that actually quite a lot of the development of your practice is in your own hands. There's a lot that you can do yourself to make sure that you're in a best position to get the work that you want to get. And I think really there are 3 tips that I'd like to give in this regard. The first is to treat every single case and every single instruction as an opportunity. Because if you put your best foot forward, and if you make sure that your client care is excellent, then that increases the chances that the next time that solicitor wants a barrister from chambers, they don't just phone up and say, I want someone of 3 to 5 years call. They'll be phoning up and they'll be asking for you. And if you've put on that good performance, they'll also be telling their colleagues at their firms that they've just used someone who's really good, who they should think about using. So really take each opportunity that you have to show what you can do. And it's quite interesting, when I looked at my QC form, about half of the referees on that form were from firms that had been instructing me since I was a pupil. So you really do, as Melanie was saying, you build up your networks, and those are the people that will be with you throughout your career. And the second tip I would give is don't be afraid to knock on doors. And I mean that not just in the metaphorical sense, but also in a literal sense. I mean, one of the most interesting cases of my career I got because I saw from something I read in the newspaper that a member of my chambers, a silk in my chambers, was doing the case. And I went and knocked on his door and said, look, I've just read in The Guardian that you're doing this really interesting case about the gig economy and Deliveroo and workers' rights. I'm really interested in that area. I've got some quite interesting ideas about that. Do you need any help? And he said, yeah, why don't you be my junior? And that was one of the most interesting cases I did, and one of the cases I was asked most about in my QC interview. So it's really about grabbing those opportunities. I think the third tip I would give is join your specialist bar association, get involved and start to be recognised once you've decided what areas that you want to do, and start to be known as a face or someone that's properly interested and serious about that particular area of law. And if you follow those sorts of tips that I've given, I think that quite a lot of the power is in your hands to take your practice in the way that you want it to go.
Thank you, Katharine. That's incredibly helpful to have those 3 tips that we can bear in mind and go away with. Now, trying to advance your practice as a junior barrister is not an easy thing to do. And trying to do so as a Black barrister comes with a whole host of additional challenges, often linked to our race. So I want to now turn to look at some of the difficulties that Black barristers encounter and hear a bit about how our panel has successfully navigated those in their careers. Now, one issue is something that has been talked about quite a lot recently, and that is the problem of Black barristers attending at court and people assuming that we are absolutely anybody but the barrister. Now, Ijeoma, I'm going to come back to you. Have you encountered similar issues in your career? And if so, how did you deal with the effects of it?
So in the past, I have encountered situations where I've been mistaken for a client or a member of court staff. And I have dealt with the situation with as much graciousness as I can muster, being very clear that I am in fact a professional representative and that I'm here to do my job. And I think that's really all in the short term that one can do. I mean, my priority when I am at court is to find and represent my client. It's not to engage in arguments with members of administrative staff or security staff or indeed judges. So I think that those sorts of situations occasionally occur. They are unfortunate. If they are embarrassing, it is for the person who in their ignorance assumes that because of the colour of your skin, you could not possibly be a professional. If I'm in a good mood, will take it in relatively good humour. If I'm in not quite such a good mood, I may be a little bit terser about it. But I would say this, that it's never something that I would let put me off my stride. I think, as all of the panel members that we've heard from this evening have said, the best thing that one can do as an advocate to build one's practice and one's profile is to be good at what we do and to be professional. And I think as long as we are being good and we are being professional, we are the best possible adverts that we can be for ourselves. And that's what I try to hold on to in the face of adversity and ignorance when I encounter it.
Thank you, Ijeoma. Barbara, I'm going to come to you next, and I'm going to throw at you a phrase that I think we have all heard of, if not felt ourselves directly at one point or another, and that is imposter syndrome. Now, my question to you, Barbara, is this: how have you successfully overcome the burden of carrying imposter syndrome as a Black woman at the bar?
Thank you. I think I should start by saying I'm just thrilled to be a part of this panel. I'm looking at the successful Black women and thinking, I never thought I'd see this day, and I'm very glad to be here. Imposter syndrome. I mean, first of all, I should say that there is no such thing for me as destination self-belief, as in it's done and dusted, I never have to think about it again. Imposter syndrome, that quiet, pernicious voice that says, are you a phony? Are you a fraud? But for me, it's really about belonging. Do I belong here? You know, is this profession for me? And for me, imposter syndrome is both real and imagined. It's imagined because I'm not a phony and I'm not a fraud. I have got the qualifications. I did very well at university. I did very well at bar school. I secured pupillage when I was at bar school. I secured a tenancy when I was a pupil. So far, nothing to see here. But it was that sense of belonging. It was that sense of, is there a place for me here, despite the fact that I'm equal to? And so some of it was definitely a construct of my mind, but some of it was also what the external told me. You know, the external, Natasha began with some figures, and the Bar Council's July 2020 figures shows that roughly there's about 6,500 female barristers. But out of that 6,500, there's only about 320 that identify as Black or mixed Black and white. So to some extent, when my mind tells me I don't belong, there is that factual thing that I have to also grapple with. There came a time when I was thrown into the bucket called BAME. What does that even mean? It doesn't tell you anything about me when I have a rich cultural heritage that I'm extremely proud of, that is just lost in that otherness that says BAME. Very frustrating. There is also what people are pleased to call microaggression. Now, it's only micro when it doesn't land on you. But for me, those insults and aggressions were nothing micro. You know, where do you come from? No, where do you really come from? Unnecessary. When I became a recorder, one of my colleagues said, with a straight face, well, your appointment would be really great for their stats. Pardon? Well, you tick both boxes. Black woman. A member of my chambers looked at me and said that with a straight face. So there are all those. So there's the real and the imagined. There are the going to court and being mistaken for a member of the administrative staff and that sort of thing. And of course, what I did to combat that to some extent was, in my family, we talk about upping your swagger. So I remember I was about 2 or 3 years cool. I was at court. Somebody thought I was an usher. Nothing wrong with being an usher, but they'd made a beeline to ask me a question in circumstances where she walked past a number of people to ask me. It was very plain. My brother said to me, you know what, Barbara, you need to up your swagger. You need to make sure the next time you enter into a court building, nobody thinks you're anything but the barrister. So you do that. And I do that to great success. But I can also share with you that in June this year, when I went to sit at a court in London, in the middle of this pandemic, first time I'd gone into town, the security officer, as he approached my car to let me into the car park, said to me, "Don't worry, love, I'm not going to shoot you." That was 2.5 weeks after George Floyd had been killed and Black Lives Matter was all in our minds. You know, I have to go to work and get past that. So it is definitely real or imagined. But in the end, the reason why most of the time that voice is quietened down is because there is a tension between fear, as in, do I belong, and faith, I'm good enough. And for me, that battle is won by faith, because faith as in faith in myself, because I know that I'm equal to, and I know that I've more than got the stripes to be here. But I wouldn't wish anybody to think that there is a destination where it's all done and dusted. It comes up. But what I found is, over the years, I've got, first of all, I name it, I share about it, and I have tools to deal with it. And so it's that's how I've dealt with that.
Thank you, Barbara. I think there was lots of advice there for us to take on board. And I think your point about belonging is such an important point and very much ties into the question of imposter syndrome, because as Black barristers, we are a minority in the profession. So we immediately stand out as being different. Now, I think because of that, because we stand out as being different, there is a concern by many Black professionals where people think that in order to succeed in a profession which is predominantly white, we have to assimilate or tone down our Blackness. Now, Katharine, I'm going to come to you first for this question, and then Alison, I'll come to you afterwards with this question, which is, looking back, were you conscious of pressure to tone down your Blackness at the bar in order to succeed? And what advice would you give to us junior barristers who are facing the dilemma of, do we assimilate or do we remain our real and authentic selves? Katharine, please.
I think I'm going to take the second part of that question first, because one thing that I've been struck by recently is how many junior Black barristers or students have contacted me over social media to ask me about their hair. And they have been asking me, as a Black barrister, should they be attending pupillage interviews with their natural hair? And I think we just need to stop and pause and think about how ridiculous it is and how awful it is that people should have to think about whether something that grows naturally out of their head should be changed simply to turn up to a pupillage interview, and that somehow in this narrative they've been made to feel that their natural hair is in any way not professional. And my advice to them has always been the same. It's been twofold. Firstly, wear your hair however it makes you feel comfortable. Because when you go into those pupillage interviews, you need to shine and you need to be your authentic self, and you need to go in there and feel comfortable and put on the best performance that you can to get that pupillage. And then the second point that I think flows from that is, why would you want to be a member of chambers where you have to change your hair to get in? What sort of career is that going to be for you? What sort of setting is that going to be for you? How's that going to affect you mentally if you don't even feel that you can turn up to the interview being yourself? So that's the way that I've always advised them. And then perhaps to take your first point, as I think those who know me will testify, I've never really dialed myself down at all. I've always, this is me. And I've, again, just thought it very important to try and be my authentic self. I think there is, it's fair to say, perhaps unconsciously in the back of one's mind, a knowledge that it's very easy as a Black woman to be pigeonholed into the angry Black woman or the aggressive Black woman, that's a stereotype that's lingering there, ready for certain people to pounce on. But I think that the advice to everybody watching this and thinking about a career at the bar is come to the bar as you.
Thank you, Katharine. And Alison, same question to you, please. Assimilation versus real authentic self.
Hi, can you hear me properly?
Yes, perfectly.
Hi, Mavis. Firstly, just echoing what Barbara said, thank you for inviting me. And thank you to the Black Barristers Network for inviting me to be in a panel with such wonderful Black women tonight. And Natasha and Mavis, I include you in that description. Very honoured and pleased to be here. In answer to your question, this is something that I have always tried to be very conscious not to do. If you start, as Katharine says, if you start denying who you are, ultimately that's going to eat away at you. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your soul. Black people in British society, we're not a monolith. Yes, we are all part of the African diaspora, either coming directly from countries on the African continent or the Caribbean or South America, or being first, second, third, or many, many, many generations down the line of living in the UK. And I think from the discussions tonight, we can see that we all, the women on this panel, we all came to the bar via different routes and have different journeys, which will resonate in different ways for different people watching. That said, for me, and I think statistically this is correct, many, many, many Black and brown people are going to be working class. We are disproportionately part of the working class in this country, and that's another group that historically is underrepresented at the bar, and even more so now because of financial constraints. And often young Black people lack the confidence of our white public school educated counterparts and colleagues who have had it drilled into them from the age dot, that you're good enough, you're entitled to be where you are, and that they never question that. It's interesting, the current political battle about free school meals has sort of taken me back to my childhood. You know, I went to a comprehensive in the East End, and everybody there was working class, but there was poor and there was poor. And those of us who had free school meals and had the school vouchers that you had to go to special shops to get your uniforms were looked down upon. And it instilled in me, and even from a very young age, I remember it made me sad, but it also gave me a real sort of sense of rage and anger, righteous indignation, and it spurred me on. And you know, as individuals, that what we are is made up of all the aspects of our being. And if you try to erase those traits, be it your accent or metaphorically divest yourself of your Blackness, you're going to have a day of reckoning when it all eventually comes back to you, and it will never make you truly happy. Now, look, we all have to modify ourselves to an extent by being barristers. If I was going to be my true self in court and with clients, I'd probably be, for a start, speaking with a much, much stronger Cockney accent than I speak with now. I'd probably have it peppered with the odd West Indian idiom and saying, and I'd probably be kissing my teeth every time a judge or an opponent or a client for that matter said some foolishness. Now, of course, I don't because I modify myself to the situation I'm in. But modification doesn't mean that you completely subsume and erase your identity. And if you, as an individual, as a young student coming into the bar, you feel that you are compromising your identity and toning down your Blackness, then there is something wrong about the environment you're working in, not you. And that's what you've got to remember. Has race held me back? You know, in many respects, I've been lucky in the chambers that I've been in as a pupil and as a barrister. My life came full circle because I started off as a pupil at Garden Court, then second six at Tooks, 20 years as a tenant at Tooks. And then since Tooks dissolved, I'm back at Garden Court. And they are very atypical chambers compared to the rest of the bar. At Tooks, half of the chambers, when I first got there, were women. A third was black. And it was those black women, and I have to, you know, give them a name check now because they were so important. Sandra Graham, Tanu Malwagner, both of whom sadly are no longer with us, Christiana Hyde, Janet Plange, Yaya Boa, Margot Boyd, those amazing black women were there when I was a young junior barrister. They lifted me up, they supported me, they were there when I needed literally a shoulder to cry on. They were there when I needed someone to tell me, you were amazing today, that was fantastic. They were my biggest cheerleaders. They were a huge part of me being where I am today. And I understand and I appreciate that many young black people are not going to have that advantage. They may be the only black face in their chambers, and it's very difficult to put your head above the parapet when you're the only one. But remember, and please remember, that all of us, we are only an email away. Reach out to your black colleagues. Representation matters, I've been told time and time again, and it's so, so true. Seeing black people, seeing black women in positions that we've achieved, I think it's imperative that we give back, and we all do. And so I say to young people and to junior barristers who find themselves in those situations where they are the only black face in their chambers, they can see that they are not getting the same opportunities necessarily as their white colleagues. They're being held back for whatever, be it clerking reasons, be it solicitors, and they feel unable to speak out, to put their heads above the parapet. Katharine mentioned some really good organisations and ways you can deal, but you can reach out individually to other black people at the bar, because as I said, we're only an email away. And organisations such as your own, Mavis, the Black Barristers Network, Black Women in the Law, Bain Family Network, they're sort of springing up, like they're growing like topsy, and it's fantastic because when I was a young person, there was a Society of Black Lawyers, which is fantastic in its day, and that's kind of, for various reasons, sort of dissipated. So it's wonderful to see, you know, the energy and the enthusiasm of the young black people at the bar who are really pushing things forward and are saying that they are here, they're entitled to be here, they're valued, and they are unapologetically black, be that in the way you wear your hair, the way you speak, the way you respond to the racism that you unfortunately and inevitably will encounter at different times in your careers. So I think that's what I would say, you know, people now are just reach out, support each other. It's really important. And those who are in positions where you feel more comfortable about speaking out, you're, be it through seniority, be it through the job that you're doing within the bar, it's incumbent upon us to be there for the younger people as well as ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for so many mic drop moments. I just feel like I need to sit here and just click for so many things that you've just said. Thank you so much. And you touched on something when you were speaking, where you asked whether race has ever held you back. And I'm going to swing to you, Melanie, to kind of pick up on that question. Do you feel as though race or racism has ever held you back at any point in your career so far?
Well, we live in a society where racism exists. So if racism exists, we as barristers are not going to be immune to it. And we've heard some stories today where people have suffered racism in court. And I don't know a single barrister, black barrister, who does not have stories to tell. We have all got stories to tell, but it's how you overcome that and how you deal with those issues. Having been appointed QC, I can't sit here and say that I feel that race has held me back. And like Alison, I've been actually really, really fortunate because I started off my career at Tooks and had wonderful role models. And the chambers that I'm in now, We have a group of Black women who are really supportive. But it's not about me. It's not about us. It's about the statistics. And we know that we are underrepresented as silks. And, you know, when I think about whether race has held us as Black barristers back, I mean, I look back at someone like Rudy Narayan, who actually died the year I was called. And I became a barrister because I read a book that he wrote called Barrister for the Defence. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I read this book and I thought, wow, this is it. You know, that was my light bulb moment. And many people have said that he should have been the first Black silk, but he wasn't, because at the time he was too political. He spoke out about racism. And back in those days, we don't have the freedom or the visibility that we now have. So no, he didn't become a silk. Race held him back. But there are lots of people, I hope, who are watching this webinar who can see 6 of us and know that it's possible. And certainly when I was thinking about applying for silk, I had role models that I could look up at. I had, you know, Black QCs that I could, you know, get advice from, that I could see that it's possible to actually make it as a, you know, you can become a QC in this profession, you can make it. So, you know, I think it would be a bit churlish of me to sit here and say, well, race has held me back when I've been appointed silk, but it's not about me. It's not about, you know, the 6 of us. It's about, you know, the rest of us, you know, and about the youngsters who are coming up, who are calling out racism. And, you know, there's so many stories that we could all talk about, things that have happened to us. But what I will say is that you will experience racism if you're Black, but you'll also come across some really good, decent people, and hold on to that. And you can make it. Doesn't matter if you're Black, you can make it as a silk, you can become a judge. And, you know, things are better than they were. And I don't think that we can say that, you know, that we haven't grown as Black barristers, because there's 6 of us sitting here. I think we've doubled the amount of Black silks in a year. Certainly Black female silks, you know, and I mean, it's an honour for me to be sitting here with all these wonderful women. So, as I say, it's not just about me when we're talking about does race hold you back, it's about all of us. And actually, you know, remembering those who came before us, who paved the way, and hopefully we are now paving the way for the youngsters who are coming up.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And you're absolutely right in that it's amazing that the 6 of you are sitting here as silks. So I'm going to move on to the achievement that we are here to celebrate today, which is the fact that the 6 of you have taken silk this year, and 6 Black women in 1 appointment year is absolutely incredible. Now, at the bar, there appears to be a pattern whereby barristers take silk between 18 to 24 years call on average. Now, Alison, going to come to you first for this, because you took silk this year at 28 years call, so you were just a bit outside of that window. Now, were there any obstacles which prevented you from applying for silk earlier on in your career, and how did you deal with those?
Thank you, Mavis. Yes, I mean, I got to a point in my career where I did have a conversation. I remember it well with my clerks at Tooks. I was probably about 16 years call at the time. And he spoke to me about, you know, well, what's our 5-year plan? Where do you see yourself? You know, are you going to be applying for silk? And I remember at the time saying, well, no, I don't really think that's for me. I don't think I'm good enough for that. And looking back, I'm surprised by my lack of ambition and surprised by my lack of confidence, because the bar did something to me that nothing else has ever done to me in my life. It chipped away and it eroded my confidence. I came to the bar, and people that know me, because I didn't do a law degree, I did history and then political science. So I wasn't one of these people that had, you know, sort of road to Damascus moment where they saw a courtroom drama and thought, that's me, I want to be a barrister. I came to it in a very different way. And I was a super confident young woman. I remember Alison Munroe, the student who was ready to take on the world. Alison Monroe, the schoolgirl who was ready to take on the world, never mind the student, and who was full of confidence. You know, I'd had it instilled from my parents, and I had a very nurturing school. You know, knowledge was power, and that was something that was really, really important. And yet, bit by bit, over the years at the bar, as I said, you know, long before that phrase that Barbara's spoken about, the imposter syndrome, long before that phrase was coined, for many of us, we were suffering from that. And it, you know, almost comes with the territory. And it was a rude awakening when you realize that being clever, being the one that's always, you know, did the right thing, did her work, worked hard, being clever, somehow that wasn't good enough. And for the first time, I was faced with people in positions of power looking down on me and undermining me. And that was very hard to deal with. You know, as I've mentioned earlier, the opportunities that I felt I weren't given, that my white male counterparts were, you know, walking into court, seeing the incredulity on the faces of the judges and your opponents when you used words of more than 3 syllables, you know, and then that disbelief on their face, you know, is she for real? And over time, it's insidious, but over time you internalize that. Well, I certainly did internalize that negativity. And I kind of got to a position where I thought I'd just settle. You know, you were thankful for what you had. You were told that you should be thankful for what you had. You know, I was allowed into the big house. I should be thankful for that. You know, I was allowed to be a barrister. The fact that I was in the big house and still standing by the front door in the coat rack while the rest of them were eating their lavish meal off the big table, that was neither here nor there. I should be grateful for being there at all. And also, I suppose with me, there was a sense that, you know, from where I came from, I was earning more money than my mum and dad ever did. And so I shouldn't really have anything to complain about. But I got to a point, sort of in the last 2 years, Mavis, when I thought to myself, actually, you know, should I just be settling? People were telling me representation matters. And I remember being on an inquest, and the solicitor for the prison service, I was acting for the family, she wanted to know if I was getting a particular train home one night. I said, yes, I am. And I should say, this is a young woman of Asian heritage. And on that journey home, she kept on going on about how wonderful it was to see a woman of colour standing up to the coroner, being so bold in court. And it was something that she'd never seen before, and she found it really empowering. And that kind of I was quite taken aback by that. And then I was lucky enough to have a number of women, black women solicitors, black and brown women solicitors who were championing me and said to me, Alison, you know, you are good enough, apply, do this. And I sort of pulled myself together and reevaluated, you know, what was going on in my life and thought, well, actually, yes, they're right. You know, there's nothing that I can see around me when I look at, you know, other silks that I can't aspire to, or that I haven't reached that stage already. And it's really terrible that, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only one who does that. We internalize the negativity, that we settle and we narrow our horizons, even though all of us who come into law, all of us who come into the bar, none of us are shrinking violets. We're all pretty confident, you know, articulate women. And yet over time, we allow ourselves, and many of us allow ourselves to internalize that negativity. And as I say, shrink our horizons. And for me, finally, Mavis, I'll just say this, it was never, and it should never be just about personal ambition and personal gain, because, you know, when one is lifted up, everyone is lifted up. So it's really, really important, even if you think to yourself, oh my God, that ship has sailed, my time has gone, I can't apply. Don't just do it for yourself, do it for those who are coming up behind you, because they need to see you in these positions. They need to see us doing what we're doing, because it's so important for them.
Thank you, Alison. Following that, may we never settle and may we shrink no more. Barbara, I'm going to come to you because earlier on this month, you posted on Twitter celebrating your 30th anniversary of being called to the bar, which is a huge achievement. So a huge congratulations for that. So I'm just going to ask you this question, which is, what advice would you give to those practising who wrongly may feel as though they've missed their window of opportunity to apply for silk, or those who feel under huge amounts of pressure to apply within the common window of 18 to 24 years call?
Thank you. There is, I think somebody's already mentioned it, a real opaqueness about the bar. You never really know what the rules of engagement are. And you're too scared to ask the question. And you're right, there is this, excuse me, there is this unspoken rule almost that it's 18 to 24 years. And what I would say is that you apply for silk when you have excellence. It requires you to look over your 3-year career, the last 3 years, to see whether you have 12 cases of substance. And what I would say to anyone is, you do it when you have that. You do it when the time is right. There is no magic in 18 or 24 years. I delight in the fact that I have it now, and I know why I have it now. And as Alison said, it's to change the landscape. That is why I do it. I can also add to it my own personal journey to put a bit of context to it. So called to the bar in 1990, and I was moving along about the 17, 18 year mark. I was thinking, right, this is about the time they say you apply. A lot of my cases were against silks. People, both in the judiciary and members of my chambers and friends, were saying, it's your time. And you know what they say, or certainly they say in my family, if you want to give God a laugh, tell him your plans. Because in 2009, I was struck by illness. Just out of the blue, I began to feel very unwell. And I was in the middle of a big trial in the High Court. It was all going fine. And I was diagnosed with a condition which required brain surgery. And I was off work for the entirety of 2009. Slowly came back. And for me, although it was a very tough time, it was a game changer for me, because that year off really helped me to hone in what it is I wanted to be as a barrister, set the intention to be a silk, which I'd done at bar school. It kind of reignited that flame in me. And then it took some time to gather up speed to do it. I don't think that there should be an artificial date at which people apply. You apply when you fit the criteria, but you don't just happen on it. You build up from the scratch, as the others have said. You know, you craft your career, you move it in the direction you want to, as and when you have those, at the moment, that is the criteria, 12 substantial cases, that marks you out as excellent, you make the application. And I think it's really, you should be your own benchmark and not really allow other people to set artificial standards for you. I don't think I'm any less a silk for doing it at 30 rather than 20 years. And I know why I've done it. It's just brilliant at the moment for me. And it's the right time for me. So I just say, keep going. You're winning anyway by being here against the odds.
Thank you, Barbara. I think that's certainly something that we all need to remind ourselves of, that we're winning anyway just by being here. Now, Krista, if I could come to you, please. From your experience as a Black woman, what piece of advice would you give those who are considering applying for silk?
So I've got three things I'd really say. One, get a consultant. Get that consultant early, maybe 6 months or even 12 months before you hope to apply, because they will able to advise you how to read that form and work it out and decipher it. Secondly, I'd say don't be afraid to apply twice. I applied twice, and the first time I applied, actually somebody I know pretty well said to me, your time will come, but it's not now. But nonetheless, I applied, and one, you know how to do it better the second time round, but two, you send out a very positive signal to everyone around you. I am serious about getting silk. And people then, they got behind me. The clerks got behind me, other silks in chambers got me into cases. One of the problems with a commercial practice, we're hardly ever in court. So you need silks to pull you into cases. and to then give you advocacy, which is difficult again because you're already doing your own work as the leader effectively. And the third thing I'd say is don't necessarily wait for anyone to tell you they're going to support you. You have to believe you're good enough and have courage and write to all the judges you've been in front of, or the silks you've been against, and just ask them, if I apply, will you support me, or will you write me a reference? And then you'll be able to strategize as to how to fill the form in. But certainly where I am, everyone's going to support you and tell you, we think you're ready, we think you should be applying, but really the help you need is someone to write you a reference. And that's a leader, a silk on the other side, or a judge. And so those are the people you have to ask. So take courage and write those letters or those emails, or go and network at parties and find them and ask them.
Thank you, Krista. Take courage. Certainly, I think that's something that we should all be applying to our practices. Well, thank you, ladies, for the insights you have shared with us so far. I'm just going to pause here before our final question because we have some time. So we're going to take some questions from the floor, and our Q&A box has been very active so far. So I'm going to pick the first question, which is, how early is too early to start asserting yourself about the direction you want your practice to take? Melanie, could you address us on that, please?
Well, it's never too early. You could be 5 years cool and finding that you're doing things that you don't want to do. It's never too early to take control of your practice. Once you're a barrister, you're a barrister. It doesn't matter if you're 2 years cool or 20 years cool. So that's my answer. Never is too early. Take control, because when you're in control, then you have a certain amount of leverage and power that can't be taken away from you by, for example, a clerk that may want to give a brief to someone over you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Melanie. Our second question, as such high achieving women, how do you balance the responsibilities of your career with your personal and familial responsibilities? Krista, could I ask you to answer that one, please?
I have an amazing husband who helps with all the childcare and takes the kids to school. But it's a sort of give and take thing. One of the great things about being the bar is you are self-employed. And so you can build your own flexibility when you need to. So I've got 2 children, and I had a clean break for both of them. 4 months for the first, 6 months for the second. That's what I needed to do. And so you have to know where you are and treat yourself a bit kindly as well. You don't know actually how you're going to respond once you have children, but you can make a balance, and it does need a bit of teamwork. Well, for me, it's needed that with my husband.
Thank you, Krista. Moving on to our third question, someone has acknowledged, of course, that you are all wonderful and inspirational. And their question is, how did you find your authentic voice? Ijeoma, could I please ask you to answer that one?
I mean, for me, that's a tricky one, because I have, from a very early age, been very clear about who I am and what my values are. What I strove to do, as some of the other speakers have said, is to make sure that being at the bar did not erode those values and did not erode that sense of myself. So I'm, I suppose, lucky in some senses that I have always been pretty clear that I'm good enough, pretty clear that I have what it takes to be a barrister, and looking around at successful barristers, as much of what they have as I needed. The difficulty, as Alison and some of the others have said, was just holding on to that sense of belief and awareness in difficult times. And we, unless we are incredibly lucky, will encounter challenges and difficult times. So whenever I am pushed or challenged, I double down to my authentic self. I am lucky enough to have family and friends around me who endlessly urge me to keep it real, and I try and do that. And I am most comfortable and I am at my best when I am true to myself. And that's something that I've recognised and that I try to hold on to, because I think there are enough stresses and strains in life already without adding to them by trying to be someone or something that you're not.
Thank you, Ijeoma, and that's so very true. I think moving on to our next question, which is this, and it says, as a barrister, you have to be impartial and not allow your personal views to affect your work. With this in mind, are you able or comfortable speaking out publicly on issues such as Black Lives Matter or any other potentially political issues? Alison, could I please ask you to answer that one?
Thank you. Well, I think because a lot of the work I do is overtly political in the sense that, it's a lot of the, for example, Hillsborough, Grenfell, these are overtly political cases. They have activism and they have campaigns allied to them. So in that sense, it's very easy to speak out about issues. And taking the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, as soon as those images of George Floyd dying, and it was literally dying before our eyes, were flashed across the world and the protest started, we as the Chambers put out a statement about it. And, there was no comeback from it because it's part and parcel of who we are as a Chambers. Now, of course, not everybody is going to be in a set of chambers that does the type of activist political work that we do at Garden Court and that we used to do at Tooks, and may feel a lot more uncomfortable about raising overtly political matters. Now, I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to social media. And, I've got a page on Facebook, which I never use. And I really kind of only on Facebook to stalk and monitor what my nephews and nieces are up to and grass them up to their parents. But I don't really engage with social media, but lots of people do. And I've noticed that on Twitter, there are a lot of barristers on Twitter, and they always put the little disclaimer at the top of their page saying, well, these are my views, not the views of my chambers, blah, blah, blah. And seem to, I don't know of anyone who's come a cropper. They seem to be able to talk about and give, very, very, very personal opinions about a variety of topics and political matters via Twitter. So, it seems to be that people, as long as you are sensible about it, you're not going to land yourself in any trouble. It seems to be a means, social media seems to be a means by which a lot of barristers and a lot of solicitors can say what they want to say. But I do feel that sometimes we make artificial distinctions between what's personal and what's political. The personal often is political. So, you have to, if you've got to say it, you've got to say it and not feel afraid. And, hopefully, as I said, be sensible so you don't come a cropper.
Thank you, Alison. And I think our final question is this. Are there any particular things that Black men in the legal profession can do to assist and support Black women, in particular Black women at the bar? Barbara, if I could please ask you to answer that one.
I guess be our allies and just, together, let there be no distinction between us, that the cause is the same. We want to increase the number of representation. We want there to be greater access to our profession. We want there to be greater retention and promotion. So when we speak of our issues, it's not an us and them, it's a we thing, and for them to be our allies. But I wonder what the person thinks that as Black men they can do for us. We're doing what we can, but I think it's just togetherness, isn't it? So that as between ourselves, there is no division. As between ourselves, we stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers, and we together then face the world. And I think that's how they can best help us.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'm just looking at the time, and I think we may have reached the end for questions from the floor. But thank you all to everyone who has sent in a question. I'm so sorry if we haven't had the time to get to yours. But do feel free to email us at the Black Barristers Network, and particularly students, if you have questions about work experience that we can perhaps guide you towards different things that can assist you on your journey. Now, our final question. We're going to have a quick fire round question just to end our session and conversation this evening for all our panelists to answer. And the question is this: looking back over your career journeys, the trials you've had, the triumphs you've had, the obstacles you have overcome, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to our watching attendees, to junior Black barristers and to aspiring barristers watching this evening? Katharine, can I please start with you?
Thank you, Mavis. I remember vividly the day Patricia Scotland took silk. I remember seeing her photo on the front of the newspaper the next day and thinking, if she can do this, so can I. So what I want to say to every single Black student watching this, every single Black junior barrister watching this, is to look at the six of us, look at our faces and think, if they can do it, so can I, and believe it. Because it's about self-belief, and if you've got that self-belief, you can get anywhere.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katharine. Melanie, over to you.
If you want to take silk, it's all about your cases. So my piece of advice would be, I'm talking from the perspective as a criminal defence barrister, try and win every single case that you get. Because what that will mean is that you will work incredibly hard and your client will have a fair trial. But also when you do an area like crime, you will face so much stress in terms of, having a client who maybe is facing 30 years and that is due 30. And if you know that you have done everything that you can do and you've worked as hard as you can, it will make it easier. So my advice is to try and win every single case, however hopeless, and fight.
Thank you, Melanie. Same question to you, Krista.
I think what I'd say is never see yourself as in competition with people around you or barristers around you. What you have to do is find your own space, find where you can excel, where you feel comfortable and happy, and make your own path and do your own thing, so that otherwise there's no point doing a career unless you enjoy it. And the way to do that is to find your space and feel comfortable in your own skin, growing and making your own path.
Thank you, Krista. And Barbara, over to you, please.
Thank you. I would say find your tribe. As in, find those of us who are around. As Alison said, we're only an email away. Feel free to ask the questions. As I said before, the bar is opaque. Some of the rules of engagement are difficult to understand. You're not alone, okay? You're not alone. If your head is telling you you're alone, I'm telling you to reach out and ask. And I'm always happy to answer. It is my absolute ambition to be of help to those who are coming from behind us and the juniors. So yeah, what I would say to any student or young barrister is reach out.
Thank you, Barbara. And same question to you, Ijeoma.
Well, I would echo the really sage advice that you've heard already, and I would say a couple of things. Don't be afraid to name and state your ambition. Ask for advice. Listen to that advice. But then you must make the decisions and you must take the actions, and you have to take responsibility for what follows.
Thank you, Ijeoma. And last but by no means least, Alison.
Thank you. Well, I'll end with a quote. It's a quote I used the other day because I think it just sort of encapsulates to me everything. It's from a woman called Shirley Chisholm, who in 1968 was the first Black woman to be elected to the US Congress. And in 1972, she was the first African-American candidate for a major party nomination for president. And she ran for the Democratic nomination, didn't get it, but she was the first one to run. And basically she looked at she was brave, she was bold. And we need to be brave and bold and support each other, believe in our worth, value yourself, because you've got so much to bring to this profession and you will make a difference. And what Shirley Chisholm said is this: if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair.
Thank you, Alison. And on that mic drop that you've all given us this evening, I'm going to wrap up our conversation there. Thank you all so much for all the wisdom that you have imparted on each of us watching this evening. It's been such an honour to be in conversation with the 6 of you wonderful women tonight. Over to you, Natasha.
Hi everyone, I'm back again. Just a quick one to say thank you so much to our panelists. As you can probably see from the chat, everybody is saying how amazing this event has been. For me, I have been clapping. I have also been clicking. I swore at a couple of points when Barbara Mills was telling us some of her comments. And I've almost been in tears with this talk tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic and inspirational. Some of the BBN committee have been saying that this is the best event that they have attended, bar none. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mavis, for chairing tonight's event. I believe this is the first event she's chaired. She was nervous about chairing it, and she's been absolutely fantastic. She smashed it out of the park, and I'm so proud of her. Thank you, Garden Court, for allowing us to use your Zoom. And thank you all for attending. If you want more information about the Black Barristers Network, then please do check us out on our website, contact us on our contact page. Do let us know if you like these kinds of events, if there's any other events you have any ideas for us to put on, and we'd be happy to try and accommodate you all. Thank you very much and have a good evening.